The room fell silent the moment Daniel Calloway stepped through the door. 300 guests, candlelight on the water, a jazz quartet midway through something slow and golden, and then, like a tide pulling back, the sound drained away. People turned. Champagne flutes paused in midair. At the center of the room, in a silver dress that had cost $4,000, Sarah Calloway lowered her glass. She saw her husband standing in the doorway. Then she saw the man beside him, holding a manila envelope. And in the space between one heartbeat and the next, she understood everything. But to understand how we got here, we need to go back 18 months. Daniel Calloway was 43 years old, a structural engineer who had spent 2 decades building his career the way he built everything else, carefully, precisely, without needing anyone to applaud the process. He drove a 10-year-old sedan. He wore the same watch for 11 years. He was the kind of man people underestimated at first meeting and respected deeply by the second. He had been married to Sarah for 12 years. And he had loved his father for 43. When his father passed in March, after a brief illness, the grief was the quiet kind, the kind that doesn't announce itself. Daniel sat with it the way his father had always taught him to sit with hard things, patiently, steadily, without performance. The estate settled over several months. The inheritance came to $2,300,000, a rental property in Austin, a stock portfolio that had compounded for 30 years, and the savings of a man who had never once spent more than he earned. Daniel told Sarah the night the will was read. She held his hand. She cried. She said, "I'm here. I'm always here." 6 weeks later, she opened an account he didn't know existed. The first change Daniel noticed wasn't financial. It was tonal. Sarah had started calling him the responsible one in conversations with friends, but the way she said it had shifted. Responsible had become a code word. It meant predictable. It meant settled. And in her voice, settled had begun to sound like a diagnosis. He noticed. He said nothing. He waited. The bank statements were where the numbers started telling the story. Their joint account was hemorrhaging money at a rate no household expense could explain. Over 9 months, $240,000 had left that account in transfers, each between $8,000 and $12,000, spaced carefully apart, rhythmic and deliberate. He printed the statements. He laid them out on his desk under a lamp and sat with them for a very long time. Then he hired a forensic accountant and said absolutely nothing to Sarah. What she didn't know was that Daniel had already made his decision. He just needed the complete picture first. The forensic accountant's report came back on a Tuesday afternoon. The transfers traced from the joint account to a secondary account in Sarah's name, opened 6 weeks after the funeral. From there, the money had moved in neat and regular amounts to the personal account of a man named Marcus Webb. 40 years old. Divorced. He ran a nightclub in downtown Houston. He drove a car that cost more than most people's annual salary. He wore a cologne that Daniel had been identifying on his wife's scarves for the better part of a year without being able to name it. He had a name for it now. That same afternoon, Daniel called his attorney, Robert Haynes. The trust paperwork had been drafted weeks earlier, held in readiness. Every dollar of the inheritance, property, portfolio, every cent, moved into an irrevocable trust within the week. Structured before any divorce filing. Outside the marital estate. 30 years of his father's discipline and patience, legally sealed and completely untouchable. Daniel signed the documents on a Thursday. He went home. He made dinner. He listened to Sarah describe her birthday party plans with the patient expression of a man who understood exactly what he was listening to. She had been planning the party for 6 months. 300 guests. A waterfront venue in the Pearl District. A jazz quartet, a dessert bar, gold leaf on the 7-tier cake. She had spent $41,000 of the money she had stolen making every detail perfect. She sent him vendor invoices and asked his opinion on centerpiece arrangements. He told her everything looked great. He meant nothing by it. He was simply waiting. But what none of those 300 guests would know, when they walked through those venue doors that evening, was what was already inside the envelope folded in Robert Haynes's jacket pocket. The evening of the party, Daniel dressed in the gray suit he had worn to his father's funeral. He called Robert and confirmed the time. He took a taxi to the venue, arriving 90 minutes after Sarah had left with her friends, already champagne bright and laughing. The room was everything she had designed it to be. 300 people. Music low and golden. Candlelight turning the waterfront outside into something cinematic. And Sarah, at the center of it all in her silver dress, radiant, working the room with the ease of a woman who believed completely that she was exactly where she deserved to be. She saw Daniel and gave him the party smile. The practiced one. The one that meant glad you came, don't need you here. And then Marcus Webb put his arm around her waist. It was reflex. The particular carelessness of a man who had been cautious for 18 months and had finally let his guard down in a room that felt like victory. Sarah stiffened instantly. The arm dropped. But the room had already registered it, a ripple of awareness moving outward, table by table, face by face, 300 people silently revising the evening they thought they were attending. Daniel looked at Marcus. He nodded once, slowly. Then he looked at Sarah. She crossed the room in seconds, voice low. Daniel. He's just a friend. It's not what. I know what it is, Daniel said. Quiet. Even. The voice of a man who had known for 9 months and had spent every day since building something she couldn't touch. Please. Listen to me. We can. Sarah. Just her name. Nothing else. Her hand found his arm. That was when Robert Haynes stepped forward from the edge of the room, manila envelope extended, and spoke her full name in a clear, unhurried voice. Sarah Marie Calloway. The quartet played on for 3 more bars before the musicians noticed. Then the room was completely still. You've been served, Robert said. On behalf of Daniel Calloway. Divorce petition. Exhibits attached documenting $240,000 in unauthorized transfers from the joint marital account. Your attorney will receive the full package by 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. 300 people heard every word. Including Marcus Webb, who had taken 3 slow steps toward the exit and stopped. Including Sarah's mother, who had flown in from Charlotte for the occasion and was standing 15 feet away with a glass of champagne she had forgotten she was holding. Including the friends who had helped plan every detail of this room, who were now looking at Sarah with something far worse than anger. They were looking at her with recognition. Sarah's voice, when it came, was stripped down to almost nothing. You did this here? In front of everyone I know? The tears came fast. You humiliated me. In front of everyone. Daniel looked at her for a long moment. He thought about his father. He thought about the kitchen floor the morning after the funeral, sitting with Sarah's arms around him, and the words she had said. I'm here. I'm always here. He thought about the account she had opened 6 weeks later. You started this, he said. I just finished it. He placed his untouched champagne glass in her hand. He straightened his jacket. He walked out through 300 silent people, through the candlelit room she had built with his father's money, and into the cool night air without looking back. The legal proceedings took 9 months. Sarah's attorney was aggressive and thorough. She argued for a portion of the inheritance, citing years of marital contribution. The trust held. Every protection Daniel's father had built over 30 years, and every measure Robert had added, remained intact. The marital estate was divided fairly and by the book. Sarah received exactly what the law entitled her to receive. Not $1 of his father's money. Marcus Webb, as it turned out, had been processing payments through the nightclub in ways that eventually drew the attention of federal investigators. The club closed 8 months after the party. The apartment he and Sarah had shared, funded, the forensic accountant confirmed, with $60,000 of the transferred money, went back to the landlord. The car was repossessed. The watch that had appeared in the exhibits at a retail value of $22,000 sold at auction for $9,000. Daniel heard all of this through peripheral sources and without particular satisfaction. He wasn't looking for updates. He had already moved somewhere else entirely. He bought a smaller house on the east side of the city, in a neighborhood where nobody cared what you drove or wore. He had been planning quietly, without telling anyone, a community housing development in partnership with a nonprofit his father had supported for most of his adult life. The trust was funding the first phase. $2,200,000 doing exactly what his father had always believed money should do, building something that outlasted the man who earned it. He thought about Sarah sometimes. Less and less as the months passed, and then almost not at all. When he did, it wasn't with bitterness. It was with something closer to the feeling of a man who finally understands where he was standing all along. She had believed his quietness was weakness. She had looked at a man who never needed to perform his confidence and decided he had none. She had mistaken patience for passivity, deliberate calm for obliviousness, and in doing so she had handed him every month he needed to make certain that when she finally turned around, there was nothing left to take. The inheritance his father left him was never really about the money. It was knowing what to protect, and how long to wait, and when to walk. What would you have done? Drop your answer in the comments.